Okay, good morning everyone. Is everyone still enjoying the conference? I appreciate I'm the person between you and lunch. So I'll try and be brief or focused anyway. Instantly being unfocused, did notice after that wonderful talk about sustainability, the great combination of pouring rain and sprinklers out there. So great opportunity there, as we procurement people would say. Okay, I am just a little bit about me. My background is predominantly local government. Probably like all of you, I got into procurement as my career of choice. It was my burning ambition to be a procurement director from the day I could talk. And I went into, no, the reality is I was a music teacher, fell into procurement, as I imagine most people do. You don't tend to have that as a desire, but I've been in procurement for almost 30, just shy of 30 years. So predominantly local government, so I'm used to large, sprawling organisations, multidisciplinary organisations, and previously used to chair the National Advisory Group for Procurement across the whole of local government, so that being National Advisory Group NAG. So my husband's delighted to be married to the chief NAG, as he puts it, so that's my credentials. So what I'm going to be talking about, a bit about the National Trust, not too much hopefully, a little bit about contract management, maybe not teaching anyone things that you don't know or wouldn't know, but really hoping to maybe look at a slightly different take on contract management. Maybe not, and that's a good thing. A bit about communications, technology, and then just sharing some of the best practice that we've recently done. And then I'd like to maybe spend a few minutes hearing from other people in the room as well. Just be as interactive as we can do. So if people have got questions, please wave at me during the presentation. You have to wave quite hard because I really start ranting when I start talking, so I might not notice that there's actually even an audience at all. So before we start then, a little bit about us. Probably shouldn't be standing right in front of this, so I'll start trying. So I'm not going to read all of that out, but as part of a National Trust, we don't spend a lot of money in the National Trust. Our turnover's around about £500 million. So probably compared to all of you out there, we're probably really small fry. But we do punch above our weight. In influence, we do have an awful lot of influence. As you can see, 4.2 million members. It's growing every single day as I'm speaking. We've probably got a few members. When we had our AGM over in Wales, we were worried that actually if everyone had turned up, that was Wales. In fact, it was bigger than Wales. We have 72,000 volunteers. Anyone in the room ever managed volunteers? Don't. It's anyone in the room been a volunteer? Be gentle with the person managing you, please. 5,000 staff, they are much easier to manage than volunteers. So not that many staff really, but we have over 17.2 million visitors a year. So like I say, influence-wise, we've got a lot of profile, but spend-wise, we only spend about £250 million. So quite a small spend as an organisation. That's our third-party spend. The other £250 million is our staff spend. So just a little bit more about us. Let's see if the technology will work. A few seconds. This isn't a shameless plug about the National Trust. This is about context. We don't procure out of a context of the organisation we're in. So it's really important that you can understand the context we're procuring in. And we're a sort of organisation, very relational organisation. We're not command and control. We're not the army. We're very much a relational organisation. And that really feeds through into the way we procure. So a bit about us. That's the sort of way we like to get our messages across in the National Trust. We don't just send an email round. So it's a very, very different culture. Let's see if I can get technology to work again. And also so we're a very large organisation geographically. 43% of all the rainwater that flows through our land in England and Wales. We've got 300 historic houses, 61 pubs. 1 in 10 of all museums. We're our largest farmer in the nation. 4 World Heritage Sites, 59 villages, 49 churches, and a gold mine. So fairly diverse. Again, when you're procuring for an organisation that does all that, then you're procuring in a very different way than if you're doing assembly line procurement. And again, it's very relational. We're a very devolved organisation, which is what this presentation is all about. We're very devolved. We have 5,000 staff, and each of them will be a procurement expert. So when we're delivering a procurement strategy, we have to consult, because that's the sort of relational organisation we are, with 5,000 people, and they will all have an opinion. And it's great. In a way, that's the wonderful richness of working with a national trust, but it also presents challenges to the procurement strategy. So one of the things I thought was great, having the original, what was it called again? Something net, the sustainability, net positive conversation earlier, because we were talking about the value added by procurement. And something very dear to my heart, I call this the procurement eclipse, is that, and I think it was Sherry, we talked about it being a back office function, procurement. I very much don't see procurement as a back office function. I see it as an essential part of delivering the organisational strategy. And I think very, very easily we get very fixated on delivering cash savings. And not only do we get fixated on delivering cash savings, we get fixated on delivering the cash savings we can measure. So it's even worse than that. It's even more operational than delivering cash savings, because actually delivering all this other fantastic stuff delivers huge cash savings, but it's incredibly hard to measure. It's a leap of faith. If we get involved in a great big tendering exercise, as might lots of other disciplines, we're the only one they're going to come to and say, what did you save in that tendering exercise? They don't ask the personnel team what they saved in the tendering exercise. They don't ask the finance person what they saved in the tendering exercise. They'll be saying to the procurement person, you were at the table there, what did you save? Well, actually, we might have avoided that tendering exercise, that huge long construction exercise, from going on for an extra year. The opportunity cost of adding that value is never going to be measured. But at the end of the day, we have to take that leap of faith. It's there, and that's the additional value that procurement teams add. And our job is actually to deliver the organisational strategy. It's not to exist in a vacuum and just deliver these weird savings. And certainly in the National Trust, we're not a bank. We're not stockpiling money. We're never going to see those savings coming off a bottom line, because we will be ploughing everything we save back into delivering our charitable purpose, which is exactly what we should be doing. And that actually makes the conversation a lot more vibrant. So for me, again, I know I'm talking about contract management, but just to understand, we're not managing contracts in a vacuum. We're managing contracts to deliver these things, not just to get 10p off I was going to say 10p off a pencil, but that'd be quite an expensive pencil, wouldn't it? As a procurement person, I probably shouldn't say that. So it's delivering these things. So it's actually being a bit bolder than just saying we're just delivering these savings that you can measure. So our strategy, we've got a very simple strategy, conveyed through the medium of a teacup, because obviously in the National Trust, tea is something very dear to our hearts. Tea and bread and cake. But tea, we actually produce or sell 3.5 million cups of tea a year, so a lot of tea. And we have a 3-pronged strategy, but our strategy is set to deliver these things. So our strategy is managing £250 million spend, our third-party spend, and manage means that we will deliver value for money. Of course it's important, of course we'll deliver it. Efficiency, massively underrated. If you think of, it's not atypical for any organisation to have half of its spend being third-party spend, and half of its spend being staff. So procurement is half of what you do. Now that's not atypical. If you do half of what you do efficiently, the professional lift that gives to every organisation can't be quantified. It's amazing. And so it's really underrated. It's not just about having some sort of procure to pay system. It's having a culture and an organisation that doesn't roll its eyes about every time it has to do something. It's having a people that feel empowered to get on with stuff because they're not held back by inefficient processes. Quality. Obviously, this isn't just the Rolls-Royce quality, it's consistent quality, understanding that we're buying something that's fit for purpose. Now, in an organisation like the National Trust, who knows what that is? We buy so much diverse stuff. Unfortunately, I was giving this presentation the other day at Bateman's. Anyone been to Bateman's, one of our properties? The ancestral home of Rudyard Kipling. And I was giving this presentation saying we can't afford Rolls-Royce. Unfortunately, and what's the chances of this? There was a Rolls-Royce right beside me. But it was a very old one. It was Rudyard Kipling's old Rolls-Royce. But, you know, when you're talking about Rolls-Royce, be careful that you're not standing beside one when you say we can't have one. Policy, again, one of the things that we were discussing around sustainability. We're an organisation that is sustainable. I mean, our ethos is a sustainable planet and experiences for people into the future, a very long-term organisation. And again, for our procurement strategy, we need to be delivering those sorts of policies. And you've heard a lot about this, so it's all very joined up today. I don't know if it's deliberate. And managing risk as well, obviously. And our risk and our currency in the National Trust is our reputation. So when we're managing our contracts, we're managing all these things. So managing our spend, what does that mean? We've got a very simple 3-pillared strategy. The first one is category management, common and repetitive spend, which is really hard in the National Trust to get commonality, but we will get there. So as much as we can do, should be going through that, probably similar to your own strategies. The next one is our large, great big projects. So for instance, yesterday, I was up a ladder at Clarendon. Anyone heard of Clarendon? Very sad story, it burnt down last year. So we've got a huge mansion, looking down into this shell of a mansion. Now we are talking millions of pounds worth of construction work that needs to be done on this mansion. We have at any given time about 80 projects like this in the pipeline, so a massive amount of activity construction-wise and other projects, visitor engagement projects, those sorts of projects. So it's about managing, having a process that manages those tenders. And I've got a team, a central team of 12 people. So this is very devolved, this organisation. So our strategy is about managing those through training people and then identifying the high-risk ones that we get more involved in through formal engagement at the right times. And then the last stuff, the dreaded tail-end spend, which we're putting in systems and processes. We've just implemented a new ERP system. We've put in an e-sourcing program. So we're putting in catalogues. We're getting a lot more automated to try and manage a lot of that tail-end spend. So that's our strategy. So the theory is something around how do we manage contracts then, or how should we manage contracts and where are the issues, getting into the meat of this. Now, before we start looking at how we try and manage contracts, again, I think it's really important to go back to what we are managing for. We're managing to deliver the organisational strategy. And again, one of the really good things that I got from the first presentation was about we're not just managing to stop things going wrong. We are managing to make things better, that continuous improvement. For me, it's the difference between playing to win or just playing to lose. And if we're stopping losing, that's not a very exciting agenda. If we're playing to win, if we're continuously improving, for me, that's something we can very much more own. And it's something we can sell to the people out there that are the users of our contracts. Because in the National Trust and probably many of your own organisations, we're very devolved. I've got a central team of 12 people. So when contracts are let, they are handed over to people that have to use them and B, manage them. And as they do that, they can either be engaged through stopping things going wrong, or they can be engaged through playing to win. And I think that's a lot more powerful as a message. I've seen diagrams like this the other way up, and I think that's wrong. So I've seen the procurement phase as something sort of small, as a small triangle, and then the operational phase is a big triangle. What I'm trying to show here with this is that with the risks on the left, and the red thing's far too technical for me, so I'll just point. The risks on the left and the actions on the right. Where the risks hit and where the actions, the mitigating actions sit, should be inversely proportional. So where it goes wrong, it tends to go wrong at the end, and it hits the operational line. It hits those people using the contracts. But the mitigating actions need to happen by the procurement team, by the professional procurement team. So we need, when we're letting these contracts, to be thinking very, very early on about how we manage contracts. And I'm sure we do, don't we? So These mitigating actions are absolutely vital before we get to handing things over. Now, I'm sure that's common sense, but I strongly suspect that in many devolved organisations that maybe isn't happening as well as it could do. And just picking out some of the specific areas that I think offer some very high risks. One of the things, it's really important if you take the risk above that actually, which is a contract not being fit for purpose. One of the things that's really important to do to make sure your contract's fit for purpose is to consult. But when we consult with hundreds of users, which we're very good at in the National Trust, what you get then is KPIs written by committee. And everyone wants their KPI into the contract. So you get contracts which effectively people seem to want to be solving world peace with. Now the reality is that we can only measure so much, and so many times I see over-ambitious KPIs. And again, what are we measuring? What's important to us? We're delivering the organisational strategy and we're getting continuous improvement. So let's measure those things. Let's not measure the speed of invoicing if we don't really care. Let's measure the things that really matter to us, that deliver our organisational strategy. Really important. I see it so often. The other big risk for me is a relationship breakdown. Again, you've got hundreds of users. In fact, I was talking to a supplier out there who's one of our suppliers, and he's got hundreds of our users. I feel very sorry for them because they're contacting them all the time and they will have lots of different requirements. The relationship breakdown is something which can jeopardise the entire contract. So we've had situations where we've had a national contract where the supplier didn't get paid by one of our very, very big properties, and that actually jeopardised the contract for the entire National Trust and the relationship, which is ridiculous. One of the really important things that needs to happen is that relationship needs to be set at the beginning of the process. The contract management needs to be very key so that everyone who's using the contract needs to understand what it is the contract's going to deliver. The SLAs need to be two-way, so they need to understand their roles and responsibilities. They need to understand what the contract isn't going to deliver. So when I first came into one of my old organisations, there was a window cleaning contract. We were managing it, monitoring it, and they were doing really well. They turned up when they said they were going to turn up. They were cleaning the windows, which is pretty much all you really want them to do with a window cleaning contract. They were very, very reasonable priced, and it was all a good contract. We as a procurement team, we thought it was going fantastically. When we did the user surveys, it came out really badly. And we're thinking, well, why does everyone hate this contract? It's a fantastic contract. They're really good. They're just really good. Never hear a squeak out of them. It's just good. And we found out everyone thought that the contract was meant to cover internal window cleaning as well as external. And so everyone thought the contractors were rubbish. And this had gone on for a year because of a communication breakdown right at the beginning of a contract. Nothing to do with a contract. Just to do with the communication and the expectation setting. So one of the really important things that we need to make sure is established when we're managing contracts is that there is a good mechanism for people to feed back their issues when they've got a contract. Because again, time and time again, I hear, oh yeah, that contract was rubbish. Well, what was wrong with it? Oh, I can't remember now. So who did you tell? Oh, no one ever listens. Well, who did you tell? Well, no one, because they wouldn't have listened. Well, okay. So we need a proper mechanism to make sure that people out there in devolved organisations are actually using their contracts. Does any of this resonate with? This is a very quiet room. Please sort of leap in if you want to. So those are the three key areas for me, or the key areas. You can all read, so I'm not going to read out all of this. One of the other issues is keeping records. I don't know if anyone else has had this situation where you've got a contract and you're paying for something and you look back and it's a lot different. The amount you're paying the supplier is an awful lot more than when you first started this contract 6 years ago. And what they're doing is an awful lot different. But you can't find any documentation which takes you from where you started from to where you are now and why you're paying all this money. So again, record. And this is what, we'll go into technology in a second because it's easy to say, it's teaching everyone to suck eggs, but it isn't happening. Why isn't it happening? Okay, very quickly, one of the reasons that I think we probably don't always manage contracts as well as we could is because of the lens we're using. I we're procurement people, so we're used to this lens. We're used to looking at contracts through this lens. Everyone used to Crowdgex, Boston, we like a matrix in procurement, don't we? So everyone's used to this matrix. And this is a lens we tend to look at when we're looking at our contracts. What I would say is that that's fine, obviously, good practice, but there are two other lenses. Now, you might be used to looking at the supplier's lens as well, so that's probably something which is familiar with everyone, looking at this from the supplier's lens. And again, if we don't get the relationship right between the supplier and our end users, when we let that contract and then we let all our end users loose on this poor supplier, then we're going to very quickly become a nuisance supplier, and that continuous improvement stuff's out the window. They're just desperate for this contract term to become, come to an end. But again, really important that when we're looking at the management process for our contracts, we remember this lens, because I think we look at it when we're looking at our contract strategy, but when it comes on to contract management, I think sometimes we forget. And the other lens that I think we probably don't even think about is the end user lens, because they're going to have a really different lens than we've got, and they're going to have a really different lens than the supplier's got. So for instance, if you're spending or your high activity contract, for instance, something like utilities, you don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about your utilities contract. You're not going to have a lot of ownership over where your electricity probably comes from. You just want it to go away. You just want it to happen, and you want it to be really simple. So, yeah, quite obvious. But there's some contracts where the end user is going to have a really high personal involvement. I remember once thinking that if only I could get so much more, I get the same amount of personal involvement from my chief exec when I worked in local government for the catering contract as I could for the huge multi-million recycling contract. But no, the catering contract was the thing that he was always in my office complaining about. So some contracts have very high personal ownership. Catering, quite often, typically, workwear, travel, things that people will get very emotional about. We've got to get these right. People need high support. They're high maintenance contracts because people feel personally insulted if you put the different cheese in their sandwich or something like that. Anyway, so we need to be very careful about these. And then there's problem contracts. Real one-off, obscure, awkward ones. New software. Again, this is not scientific, by the way. You might have very different examples in your organisation. Another example, problem contract. We needed some specific tassels made for one of our rooms. It's not even for a whole building, for a room. And we needed to find someone who was uniquely qualified in the whole country to make tassels for us. That's the sort of business we're in. Real problem contract. Or, for instance, anyone heard of Quarry Bank Mill? Yeah. Great. This is I don't know, I should know the date of Quarry Bank Mill. I don't, but obviously we're using some sort of Victorian mill equipment-y stuff. There's not many people in the country, or should I say the world, that know how to run these sorts of mills. And if one little bit breaks, then we can be stuffed. So these are contracts which can be real sort of resilience problems. They can be really awkward. And that actually would bring it to the high involvement ones. So actually where we've got things, again, even though they're not a lot of activity, we might only do them once. They might not even be a huge amount of spend, but our customers are expecting to get those right. And also our customers, our users, are going to have an awful lot of involvement themselves, an awful lot of autonomy. So again, when we're looking at managing our contracts and the process we put in for managing our contracts, just be aware that where we want our, especially in a devolved organisation like mine, the users are going to need to get involved in increasing or decreasing amounts. And I think that's a lens we quite often forget. One of the big areas for us is communications. We're a relational organisation. And one of the things we've had to learn is communications are not about telling people what to do on an email. And you saw the video. We're an organisation which, if you work in the National Trust, you expect the communications to speak to your heart. You expect things to change behaviours. And the difference between, for instance, an instruction and a campaign is an instruction might be, just do it. It changes behaviour while people are watching. So if we say to people, please use I hope people are using our new ERP system, We know that certainly if I was in the room, they really would use the ERP system. A campaign will make sure that they believe in the ERP system and they will always use it. And the same with when we're looking at people using our contracts. We don't want people to just use our contracts because they have to. We want people to believe in the contracts they're using. We want people to be bought into what those contracts are delivering. So instruction, provide information. We need them to be thinking about new concepts our contracts provide. We want them to feel like it's a good thing. And we want them that to be part of our values. And obviously, again, as a National Trust, we're an organisation with strong values. So just as an illustration of what this, and apologies for the sort of hard-hitting nature of this, but just as an illustration of the sorts of comms and the difference, mobile phones, we all know in this room that it's a bad thing to talk on your mobile phone when you're driving, and we probably don't just know that because we know that the nasty policeman will tell us off if he sees us doing it. This campaign, very hard-hitting, very effective campaign, is a sort of campaign that tells people, actually, if the policeman's not there, I really don't want to be using my mobile phone. And that's the sort of thing where people campaign for you as well. So if people get that value, then you've got other people, other users in the organisation who say, actually, make sure you're using this contract. We know the benefits and we know the risks of not doing it. Obviously, that's a bit excessive, but that's just illustrative. So if we've got, let's take it down a notch from people dying or whatever, but workwear contract, very emotive contract for us. We have rangers out in all sorts of conditions. This is a real example of our rangers out in the middle of I don't know, Lake District or somewhere like that, out there for hours having to deal with really extreme conditions. So we have a workwear contract that people are meant to use, mandated workwear contract. Now, if we get our comms right, then this is a sort of feeling that people are going to get. Whatever contract we let for workwear, unless we start putting people in dry suits, at some point they're going to get wet out in ridiculous extreme conditions, and they need to expect that. And so we need to get that sort of satisfaction. It'll be the same contract. But what we do get now is we get a mix. Some people would be out in the same conditions, and because they do get wet, even though it's going to happen, they think it's a bad contract. They'll blame the contract because we've not set their expectations up properly. So again, this is about their commitment and getting people to be bought into the contract. So technology. So this is a real romp, by the way, through contract management. Like I say, please sort of wave at me if you want to stop. This is the quietest audience I've ever come across. I personally believe that in a devolved organisation, you cannot manage contracts unless you have the right technology. I defy anyone to do this on a spreadsheet. Now, please prove me wrong if you can. Or you can get someone to do it. I think the next speaker is someone who can potentially offer that service. So again, it's very joined up, this conference. We've got a contract management system. I'm not going to say what contract management system it is because I'm not here to sell those things. But I think, again, when you do that, one of the things I think we're really bad at as organisational procurement people, because, I don't know, does anyone think that PR is a big issue with procurement? I think it is. I was at a conference the other day and there was a CFO, and I can't remember his name, and he was saying, you guys, you procurement people, you've got a PR problem. And I think we have. Anything that will help us with our PR problem. And we get these wonderful things in, this great technology, and I think we struggle to use it, and we don't do the icing on the cake stuff, which is reporting it back to the organisation enough about the power of this technology. So I think if you get your technology in, make sure you do the icing on the cake stuff. Make sure you get those reports out of it, that you're not just the only one looking at them from a darkened room. Think about nice, big, glossy reports that say some key performance messages to the organisation. And so many times I just don't see that, and it just feels, I mean, you probably do it. Maybe it's just my experience. Really important about how it's going to be managed, who owns it, and the sorts of dynamic contract management systems you can put in. So you can get systems which tell people when contracts are under review. Ours does. It's quite complicated though, and we really struggle with actually sometimes if you automate things, then actually it can sort of cause its own problems. But actually, you can get these systems now which will help you do that. To TripAdvise or not to TripAdvise, again, we're a devolved organisation. Now, my customers out there, our 5,000 users, are saying actually what they want is some sort of TripAdvisor mechanism so that they can feed back at point of whatever on their contracts. I've said no. I'd be quite interested to hear if anyone else has got any TripAdvisor type contract feedback mechanisms. Well, that makes me feel better. I don't feel so mean now for saying no. I think, again, one of the things that you have to get absolutely right if you're looking at TripAdvisor type mechanisms is people need to know the boundaries and the scope of a contract, because otherwise you're going to get people complaining. I mean, I don't know, how many times have you gone on holiday, you've looked at TripAdvisor and you've read some really, really damning feedback of a hotel, and all that's told you is that you never want to go on holiday with the bloke who left the feedback. It hasn't told you anything about the hotel, has it? And half the time, our own staff might have completely unreal expectations of a contract. So we need to get things very, very right before we start handing over TripAdvisor type feedback, I think, to our staff. The other issue is TripAdvisor is quite sexy, isn't it? Yeah, I've just been on holiday and I'm going to tell everyone about it. I've been to this wonderful hotel and it was great. It's not that sexy to feed back on the electric pat testing contract. Chances are you're only... Well, it isn't, is it? I mean, who here is sad enough to go on TripAdvisor if there was one and feed back on your pat tester? You're not. So the only time you're going to feed back is if they really annoyed you. So the chances are you're just going to get negative feedback on these sorts of things. That doesn't feel like the most comprehensive way of getting a balanced opinion on our contracts. Oops, I've got a thingy here. I have too many things in my hand. But for me, from whatever system you're using, there are some key things that need to be in it. There are some key things that you need to really think about where that information is going to come from when those key things are in it, and really think about how that information is going to be managed, and really think about the sexy, glossy stuff. How are you going to report that back into your organisation? If you're going to do all this work, make sure people see it. Think about the PR. Think about the procurement PR again, because that's the bit that's going to get people engaged with the rest of our strategy. So this is just an example of something we've done in the National Trust. I'm not a huge fan of awards, to be honest. We all kind of go out and get them. And I don't know, has anyone else ever sat in an awards ceremony and you listen to what someone else who's just won did and you think, that isn't very good. We did that ages ago. And why are they going and get an award for it? They must be rubbish, because they've only got that far, and who's stupid enough to award them for it? And you just think, oh, what a waste of all of our time. So I don't tend to think about the nature of the people giving awards. I tend to think, did someone do something that was really good, even if they won or didn't win? Now, we did happen to win this one, but I'm bringing this up because I actually think it is really good. So that's why I wanted to share it. So just going on to the engagement, this is our catering function. 300 outlets, 200 catering managers, 90,000 different food and beverage lines, and 450 different suppliers. I imagine that's actually, I think there was more, to be honest, but never mind. So we had a lot of problems. Really, again, this is how we incorporated the idea of how are we going to manage all this into our initial strategy. Solar delivery. We brought that down to 38 suppliers. We can't manage 450 different catering suppliers. And one of the great things, I find this really exciting again, is we're looking at managing things. Some of the suppliers are our own tenant farmers. So talking about social good and how we incorporate some of this real win-win stuff, we don't give people a farm. They do have to pay rent unless you go to Wales, in which case it's £1, but never mind. Don't know if anyone's seen that on the news. So we rent out farms. We then support those farmers to be a supplier. And obviously we're quite a fair buyer, so we support them. We also support them with a whole lot of sustainable projects on their land. So it's an absolute win-win. So really quite excited about that. We apply soil association type sort of service levels and standards, and we know that we got the confidence then to be saying to those people that come into our catering outlets, look, we've reached this level. We're confident that we are a sustainable organisation, at least within this category. and something called the Cookbook. That sounds quite obscure, doesn't it? But this is our way of managing this. So we've got all this stuff, but what we've done then is gone back to our catering people for a lot of consultation. This has been years in the making, and said, actually, what's our core offer, the National Trust Cookbook, so that we can then say, okay, then if you go to one of our outlets, you don't get a scone that's kind of this big, and you go to the other outlet and you get a scone that's this big. We have that standardisation, so we've brought in something called a cookbook in a really quite exciting way, and we have huge cookbook challenges and cake testing competitions, which I personally love, to deliver what's in that cookbook, and we have competition between our outlets. So very, very exciting process, a cookbook. And that is managing our contracts, but our end users don't even know that it's being managed. So there we've got sort of management, but in a way which our users are really bought into, and obviously helps our customers. So the benefits, obviously we wouldn't do any of this unless there was any benefits. So again, what were we managing for? Now we're not managing to get quicker invoicing times. We're not managing to get better, it's a lot more strategic than that. We're managing to understand where our food comes from, so we've got confidence to sort of hold our head up and be proud with the values we've got. Enhancing our brand and sharing our knowledge as well. One thing we love is by people coming, again, the other sort of a CSR benefit, when people come into our outlets, we can tell them about our supply brand and where things come from, and we can share that with them. And our customers love it as well, so it's again, huge win-win. And of course, we get all those other benefits as well, so the benefits around efficiency, risk management, and saving pounds as well. So very proud of that initiative. So I'm going to stop speaking at you now. But just to summarise, 3 things, if you are taking away anything from this, 3 things I really want to just reiterate is, remember what we're managing for. We don't just manage contracts, we manage for something, playing to win, and delighting our customers, not just making sure they're not cheesed off and yelling at us. Remember there's 2 other lenses. Let's stop looking at things through just our viewpoint. Remember there are 2 other viewpoints, at least, when we are letting a contract and looking at the management process. And convince, not instruct. There's no point telling, well, certainly not in the National Trust, there's no point telling people what to do. We need to win hearts and minds, and I think that's probably universal. And contract management comes first. When you're thinking about your contract strategies, you should be right in there thinking about how does that contract management work. So that gives us a few seconds for discussions on how you chaps are doing things, or any questions. So I'll pass it over to anyone in the room.
Silence. So you were saying that some of the staff are after kind of a TripAdvisor style. We have a supply non-conformance system and a supplier grading, and we really struggle with getting that feedback across the whole business. In certain pockets, they love to ring and have them out. And conversely, like we offer free products to gold suppliers and things at the end of the year, and you really struggle to get good feedback back, I think, as well. And I just wondered, obviously want to, because they want this TripAdvisor piece. How are we getting it at the moment?
Surveys.
Right.
We're an organisation that does a lot of surveys, and people are used to that mechanism, so we get very good responses to our surveys. And that's how we get that mechanism now. And I think you're absolutely right. Otherwise, you get what we call our official complainers the frequent flyers, and it's very nice. But otherwise, you get 1 or 2 opinions, and that's it if you get this. Any more challenges or good practice or anything or questions?
Can I ask a question? In terms of a lot of the organisations I've been involved with really struggle with passing on the messages around good contract management beyond the small central purchasing fee. Are you saying that you use a campaign-based communication mechanism primarily to get out to those default contract managers?
If it's your job to physically manage a contract, if you're a devolved contract manager, then we've got 2 things, 3 things really. We've got quite a lot of guidance, but we actually deliver training to contract managers. So we've got a training program of good contract. We call it being a good customer, because contract management sounds a bit kind of techie. So it's being a good customer, and we deliver training to those people whose job it is to manage contracts. But what we also do is then make it very easy for everyone who uses a contract to then feed back to that contract manager. So we support the contract managers in delivering that mechanism to be the feedback, to have that feedback back to them.
I liked your stressing the idea of having to be a better PR within the organisation, because sometimes I do feel that I work in organisations where it's either dogma from procurement, the answer is no, what's your question? This is the perception of procurement. Or alternatively, we're classed in the same phrase of this sort of, if somebody walks up to you and says, I'm from HR, you can trust me, do you? Because so many times we find we're having to deal with rearguard actions where people have gone, well, actually, we need this, so let's go work out how we can do it. And actually, then we've got to get it through procurement somehow. So overall, how have you found that there's been a sort of message or have you got your message out to try and improve the level of, I want to achieve some form of change, I need to engage with procurement?
Very much so. I think now we're probably becoming victims of our own success. I say I've got a very small team, and the call on my team is becoming more than we can manage, because it's taken 3 years. We're 3 years into a new strategy and a new structure. And I think we're now getting to a stage where people, probably less because of the value for money, they want that, but it's not the thing that speaks to them. Because of the issue around sustainability and the CSR issues, probably that's the thing, that's why most people, work for the National Trust, because they care, and it's about the sustainable long-term looking after places for everyone. If you can actually speak to them in that language, which we've been doing, and I think people come to procurement, and that's been really quite powerful. So yes, I think that message is getting there. Obviously, massive staff base, massive volunteer base. Volunteers can spend money too. So there's a lot of people to get to, but we're getting there.
So in fact, going back to one of your early slides about it's not just the value for money, it's the delivery of the business role.
Exactly. If people see you as a key player in delivering what we're all about, and actually how much we all care about that, then it's a very different conversation than, oh God, procurement will try and make us buy the cheapest whatever. We might make them buy the cheapest as well, but actually you couch it in, we're saving 10p off his pen. Again, let's not buy that expensive pen, but if we were, because that means that you can put that 10p into delivering the things we need to deliver.
Can I just throw one more thing into that to support that point? It was Sherry mentioned the journey of the University of Manchester. It was when they were really clear about aligning what they did in procurement with organisational strategy was the single biggest change to the reputation within that team. It actually meant they've started now to fight off requests for them to get involved more earlier on in the procurement process, and also to go publicly speak about their contribution. So that alignment with core strategy, and make sure the language is aligned with core strategy. No one gets excited by value for money. In the procurement world, we talk about value for money all the time. No one outside of procurement ever gets excited about value for money. If you talk about value and contribution, and by the way, a byproduct of that proactive approach you're talking about is we save money as well, is a much more attractive proposition than the purpose of our activity is just to save money. And it's that sort of shift that, in terms of communication purposes, is absolutely massive. Sorry.
No, absolutely.
One question. So you spoke about a list of things which should be there in a good contract. You showed us starting from the specifications. You also spoke about trialogic metrics versus supplier's perspective and relationship breakdown, right? So I've been personally studying a lot of contracts from mainly from fraud, leakages, and those kind of things, but also as a procurement professional. So my question to you is, how many imprecise contracts do you see? And I'll give an example. Let's say a contract talks about price escalation mechanism, or a price variance clause, or a formula to find. But it doesn't talk about a price reduction mechanism or a clause. That's something I call as imprecise contract. So it might be accurate, it might be fitting all those bills, but it's not precise, right? It doesn't land exactly at the same same place, same point. So in your experience, do you see out of the so many contracts that you manage, how many would you say would be precise versus imprecise?
I'd probably see a mixture, and it depends on the category as well. I think before I ever got into procurement, I remember it was probably my second day in procurement. West Sussex County Council, and a chap called Dave Weller, he was a real mover and shaker at the time, and he said there's two types of contract. I don't think he said precise, but he said there's the sort of standard one, and then and we had the social services department in that local authority, and he said there's the airy-fairy social services ones, and that's what he called them. And actually, I think one of the things that I found about too much precision in a contract is if you get the relational issue right with a supplier, and they're on the matrix where they want to be a valued supplier, then actually you can normally get more. If you just look at the precision in a contract, then you'll probably get the precision. And that's maybe not what we should be after. We're probably all better than that. We should be more ambitious. We should be after getting more. And I think we should have sort of minimum things that we want in our contract, but actually the conversation should be about exceeding that. And I think if we're too precise in our contracts, all we're doing is stopping something going wrong. And actually, if we're measuring and monitoring our contracts properly, and we're saying, look, we want more of this, less of that, and being more proactive, then we'll just be looking for more and better all the time. And I think that sometimes transcends too much. I remember going to a conference once where they said, should we have contracts? It's, the money and the time spent in delivering these huge contracts that go in the drawer, no one ever reads, do we need them? Is it a waste of time? And I think I'm probably not that brave, but sometimes I think, sometimes that sort of precision probably just stops us, probably takes us to the lowest denominator, as opposed to us just saying, actually, what do we want? Constantly, what do we want? What do we want? What are we managing for?
Presumably, actually, one of the benefits of your role, in terms of the organisation you're working for, is you can get suppliers to buy in to the end product, so you can actually reduce, do the old Dick Russell one, where effectively your suppliers become part of your or they feel they are part of your organisation, your tassel person. Actually, probably with great pride that they are the people that you go to when you need tassels for this location or what have you, and that because it makes them part of your wider family.
You're absolutely right. I think we're very lucky, obviously. I mean, it's a fantastic organisation, and our suppliers in the main do see that. I was at a construction site the other day where we have visitor days just for our suppliers, so they can bring their families, and we put on activities for our suppliers and their families. So we have a great sort of relationship with some of our key suppliers. Well, absolutely, they can show that. They can, Daddy did this, and how powerful is that for someone in their working life? So incredibly, some of our suppliers are incredibly engaged. It's great. I mean, we work with a fleet management company who puts on sustainability days at our mansions. We work with, I think it's a car maker, a very well-known car maker, to deliver their first electric type vehicle of that ilk. There's only 2 in the world. One of them's in one of our farms in Wales. We do quite a lot of R&D that's absolutely groundbreaking with our suppliers, and they come to us for those opportunities, and we've got the land and the space and the profile to give those opportunities. So and when you're looking at a Crowdjet matrix, when you're looking, what do suppliers want? Well, they obviously want money, they want consistency, they want clarity, but they also want the profile. And actually, they're people that want excitement, and probably most of them don't want, no one goes into this and go, I'd like to pollute the planet and be a bad person. All that sort of good, touchy-feely stuff, it's good for them too.
The question to the survey that you showed, right? So, do you use the survey mechanism just for finding out how satisfied your employees are with the supplier, or also in terms of identifying some contract terms which you can change or implement in the model?
It's a really good question. We should do both. I'm going to hold myself. We're not very good at this stuff yet. This is what we're working towards. And I think in the past we've probably been a bit too much of a former, and you're exactly right, we need to work towards the latter. Actually, what do we need to do with this survey to get better? What are your ideas? You're using these jackets, what do you think would be better? So absolutely.
Well,
No, because one of those things is if there are more feedbacks that start to come in on the contracts, then those may be categories where most surely a proper due diligence has not happened when you are signing the contract or even going for the bid.
It's quite difficult. I think sometimes when we're letting our contracts, because of a sort of multiple use of our stuff, for instance, again, a ranger down in the Purbeck and a ranger in the wilds of North Wales, it's such a different job. Trying to get full consultation, in the past we found that really difficult. Our new ERP system's giving us a much better and inclusive mechanism for consultation. So hopefully some of that will go away and we'll be able to let even better, more sort of fit for purpose contract. Again, I don't see how anyone can do any of this stuff without the right technology, to be honest.
Okay, so we wrap it up there.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks again, Ms. Clear.
Thank you very much.